Hey everybody, it's me, it's Matty D. And in today's video, I'm going to be doing a review of, it's my second ever review of Nitro, and it is obviously Monday Nitro's second episode as well. So it is the September 11th Nitro in 1995. It is from Miami, Florida, and there was a huge main event announced at the end of last week's episode whenever it was announced that Hulk Hogan would be taking on Lex Luger just 1 week after Lex Luger jumped ship from the WWF to appear on WCW's debut episode of Monday Nitro from the Mall of America. So it is an absolutely huge episode. Nitro, despite it being just in its second week, of existence, was just one single decimal point away from tying with Raw, and two, obviously, away from beating Raw in the very first ever head-to-head, because last week's Raw was preempted, which meant that Nitro went unopposed. So Nitro did a 2.4 rating, Raw did a 2.5 rating. So already you can see there is a buzz for Monday Nitro. There isn't a big difference between the WWE and WCW. They're both kind of on that level pegging already. So it was just quite interesting to see that already Nitro is not too far behind Raw in the ratings. And I think, in the next couple of weeks, whenever I'm doing these reviews, Nitro will probably overtake Raw, to be honest with you. I don't think it takes that long for it to get its first ever victory. But anyway, this is from Miami, Florida. It's the first Nitro in a proper arena, and it's an interesting show, to say the least. It's very interesting. We're going back obviously 26 years now, which is absolutely insane. There's a lot of the style of the matches in this show. Some of them can be kind of they're quite slow paced and there's not too much to them. But it's certainly a fascinating watch, and I just love Nitro. I love WCW. I love everything about it. So yeah, we'll dive in today, guys. First of all, I have to say, from what I've seen, there's not many people that will say that Steve Mongo McMichael was an amazing commentator, but I loved him in this show. I loved him in last week's Nitro. I just think he's such he kind of has that, I guess, that Mike Adamle charm. That's the sort of closest thing I can compare him to. He has so much enthusiasm for everything that he's doing. He starts off Nitro saying it's the hottest thing since that little old lady asked, "Where's the beef?" which is just so random and doesn't work, but it also has this strange charm to it as well. So his enthusiasm, it's really something that's an absolute joy to see. But we see a recap of last week with Hogan and Lex Luger. We see Hogan saying that he's going to be champion for forever and a day, but he'll take on Lex tonight because he's Hulk Hogan and he doesn't back down from a challenge, especially not from those WWF stars who are encroaching Nitro and trying to take their championship. Quite an interesting thing to start off with. Obviously, this is the last Nitro before the pay-per-view event Fall Brawl, and penciled in was a War Games match between Hulk Hogan, Vader, Macho Man Randy Savage, and Sting versus Kevin Sullivan's Dungeon of Doom. Vader is he's been announced that he's gone AWOL here because he's not, again, quotation marks, filed the correct documents with WCW management, whatever that means. That's a very, very, very vague explanation, but basically that's Eric Bischoff's way of writing Vader off, because Vader has been sacked essentially by WCW. He's going to resurface later with the WWF and have that feud with Shawn Michaels and kind of float around a while there. He was a bit of I've been listening to Eric Bischoff's podcast 83 Weeks, and from what I can gather, he was a bit of a malcontent, to be honest with you. He got in a lot of fights. He wasn't very popular backstage, and the final straw was whenever he got into a fight with Paul Orndorff, which I think from memory Paul Orndorff got the better hand off it essentially. But whenever Eric Bischoff heard about it, it was just he was kind of done with Vader, and he sent Vader home, and Vader did try to apologize and did try to sort things out and stay, but Bischoff wasn't having it, and that was that. So disappointing to hear, and certainly disappointing the way they wrote him off. Just he hasn't filed the correct paperwork, so we'll never see him again. But it leaves Hulk Hogan's team down 4, down to 3. So 3 versus 4 is what they're currently facing at Fall Brawl in the War Games, which isn't great. But the first match, again, Eric Bischoff is starting things off hot. It's Sabu in his Monday Nitro debut. He has wrestled a few matches in WCW's Saturday Night, which is how he had that little highlight sizzle in the last episode that we reviewed, the very first ever Nitro. But this is his very first ever match on Nitro, and it's starting things hot, just like Eric likes to, say that he liked WCW to start off hot. He likes a bit of action, something to kind of give the crowd a really good lift as soon as they're in the match. As soon as they're into the show. And wow, obviously Sabu, especially back then, could do absolutely insane things. So damn, he's a good way to start things off. He comes out to La Parka's theme, which was a bit of a surprise for me. Obviously Sabu was not long for this world with WCW. He did not stick around for long. So La Parka's theme was clearly redistributed to La Parka later on. Alex Wright, he's das Wunder Kid. He's really good technical wrestler, high flying. He kind of, I don't know if he's the babyface here, because he kind of wrestles like he's the babyface in peril. But gosh, if he is a babyface, it's very miscasted, because he just screams heel. They're saying he's the Wonder Kid. He's doing a bit of his dancing that he later does to a really obnoxious extent, and he kind of wrestles a bit like he wrestles like a babyface, but he doesn't scream babyface. Alex Wright, to me, he just seems like somebody who was very, very mishandled, and we'll see that in the upcoming weeks. I'm sure of it. I've watched a lot of Nitros from 1997, and he was being mishandled then. He was Berlin, obviously. He was mishandled then. So it's kind of a bit of a sad story. There's not very many highlights for Alex Wright in WCW, considering how long he's there. But he has this match against Sabu. Sabu does a cool dive or two, which really isn't typical for this time. He misses like that kind of chair dive that he does, and he ends up legs heading off the guardrail. Alex gets the heat, and Alex Eric Bischoff says at this point he's only 20 years old, which is insane. It's just crazy to think that this guy is, I'm 28 now. This guy is 8 years younger than me, and he's on Monday Nitro, and he's kicking ass and taking names. It's just absolutely crazy. He does a really nice flying drop kick whenever Sabu's diving down onto him. It's just kind of like a flurry of high spots, this match, to be honest with you. It doesn't tell a story in the same way. I'm sorry, I'm just going to take a drink here. In the same way, like a lot of those cruiserweight matches that Eric Bischoff like to start Monday Nitro off with. But, it's quite clunky, but it's kind of like a joy to watch. A bit like Sabu in general. He's a bit of a guilty pleasure for me. I don't think he's this amazing wrestler per se, but damn, his matches are a train wreck that you can't keep your eyes away. Alex Wright gets hit by a top rope hurricane rana for the pinfall, and that's kind of all she wrote. He hits it, he gets the pin, but Sabu doesn't get the win. After the bell, Sabu attacks Alex Wright, and he ends up hitting him with this kind of like rolling neck breaker off the top rope through a table. He lies Alex Wright down on the table like this and just jumps over him and brings his head back and sends him through the table. And it's a really impactful, really like painful looking spot. Like it looks like it really hurts. It's obviously safe enough and probably more damaging to Sabu if anything. But it leads to Sabu getting disqualified. They reverse it. They reverse the decision. They take the win away from Sabu. So it's a bit of 50-50 booking, which is kind of odd, to be honest with you, whenever Sabu is just starting off his career on WCW. Alex Wright's so young, he can kind of at this stage, get over this loss. But they decide to do it in a way that makes both of them look weak, because Alex is completely laid out. He's down on the ground. He's no use to man their base. And Sabu is a loser. He hasn't won the match. So it's a bit 50-50. But it's not the worst thing in the world. It's like a 5 out of 10, I think. But yeah, they're probably not the best match in the world, but just for seeing Sabu on Nitro, it is certainly worth checking out. So anyway, the next thing we'll go to, it's an interview between Ric Flair and Mean Gene. Ric Flair is 6 days away 6 days away from taking on his running mate, as he refers to in this promo, Arn Anderson, at Fall Brawl. And it's a bit strange because I obviously watch a lot of Nitro, like I've said, the whole time Arn Anderson was by Ric Flair's side, so it's kind of weird to see, like, maybe even just like a year ago these guys were in a feud essentially. It's odd to see, but it's happened, it's something I wasn't aware of until I listened to a podcast about Fall Brawl not too long ago. But this promo here adds a bit of context. Mean Gene says that Ric Flair was out partying in Miami, South Beach, Miami. He was getting the girls. He was doing all these Ric Flair things, which I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing nowadays to hear about. But Ric Flair has a gripe. His gripe is that Arn Anderson has been at home calling his wife and his son instead of out with Ric Flair partying and pulling women and having a good time. So that's a very valid reason to hate somebody, that they've grown up while you've stayed as you've kind of stayed immature and you haven't settled down in your life. So it's quite a fun story they're telling here. Flair says they ruled the world as the Four Horsemen. He says it was a symbol of excellence, and it's a really good promo, but there isn't much time for it because before Lex Luger comes out, very, very oddly, he tells, like, Flair tells Lex Luger how great he is. He kind of reads his stats, like says how tall he is, how thick his chest is. He keeps calling him the total package. It's very kind of sexually charged almost. It's a really, really weird promo. And Lex Luger just tells Flair, the only thing he says, "You're too much, Rick," and he leaves again. He seems very bemused by the whole thing, which makes me wonder why he came out to begin with. It's a very, very odd promo. I'm sure that the intentions here is to say, is Lex Luger a good guy? Is he a bad guy? That's a theme later on in the show. He's not saying to Ric Flair, "I'm your biggest fan and I'm going to crush Hulkamania for you and crush your biggest rival tonight." But he's also not saying, "Flair, I hate you." He's just saying he's too much. So it's a very, very strange promo, but it's a lot of fun. Whenever you get to see Ric Flair and Mean Gene, there's always going to be a good time, and there's always going to be a lot of quotable things. Just absolutely brilliant. The next matchup, it's for the WCW US title, and it's VK Wallstreet, which is strange because we had a promo last week for Michael Wallstreet, but now he's coming out as VK Wallstreet to take on Sting. VK Wallstreet, it's obviously a reference, a very weird reference. It doesn't really make any sense. It's a reference to Vincent Kennedy McMahon. It's his initials. It's a very, very strange thing, because to me, what's the harm in Vince? Like where's the issue for Vince that this guy is called his initials? It doesn't really harm him. It's maybe just part of that tit for tat that was going on back then between WCW and WWF, and them just throwing in an extra shot. But it's very strange, and especially for IRS, who does not make an impact. He's kind of at the end of his career whenever he gets to WCW at this stage. But he comes out in a suit, which is very odd outfit as well. Kind of doesn't know his own gimmick. Sting comes out to the man called Sting, and the crowd go absolutely bucked off. They go insane for Sting. It's awesome. It's such a great reaction, and it gives such a hype and such a buzz for this match. Sting, he's so over. He's so over. Eric spoils Raw. He says that Shawn Michaels beats the big guy with a super kick that couldn't earn him a green belt in the local YMCA. It's very pointed from Bischoff, who last week didn't even want to mention Raw. That's another strange thing. He didn't want to mention Raw, but now he's got wrestlers with their names changed to take shots at Vince. He's giving away spoilers. He's sending those little digs constantly. It's a little bit odd, and Mongo obviously says that it's named after uncooked eggs and all these Mongo lines that are just absolutely fantastic. But the match, unfortunately, you know, it's not that fantastic. I was more amused by the commentating, by Mongo saying all the footballers watch wrestling, including Reggie White, and Bobby the Brain Heenan asks if that's White's brother, and it's just really silly things that amuse me very much. And it was I was glad to have it because it was just an old school slow match. IRS was quite slow to his offense. There was a moment he pulled Sting behind the middle rope, kind of like how Sheamus hits his lamb punches, but Michael Wallstreet or VK Wallstreet just does one and then leaves it and goes on to defend the offense a little later. So it is quite a slow pace style. Michael Wallstreet gets a bit of the heat. He succumbs to a Sting comeback where he hits him head first on the turnbuckle lot. Sting hits the Stinger Splash, and then he hits a top rope crossbody, which was cool to see for the win. So he didn't have to bust out the Scorpion Deathlock, he didn't have to bust out the Scorpion Death Drop, just a Stinger Splash and a nice crossbody, and it's a nice win to just say that Sting's ready for Fall Brawl and he's excited to be there in WCW, and he's just a very positive and happy person. And it was a nice match that did its job. It kind of set the tone for VK Wallstreet that he's only going to be an enhancement talent at very, very, very best, but it was what it was, you know. So before we see Randy Savage versus Scott Norton, which is a match I was really excited for because there was a lot of build-up for this last week. Macho Man was ready to fight. He was raring to go against Scott Norton, and there was a bit of a breakup, and Eric said that he would fire him if Scott Norton got involved. So we were very poised to see this match, and I was looking forward to it. Scott Norton is supremely underrated in my opinion. But before that anyway, we seen a little hype package for TBS's Saturday night, WCW Saturday night, which hyped up a really good card. It hyped up the debut of the Disco Inferno, which very underrated, but we'll have a long time to cover that. Max Muscle versus the Renegade in a grudge match. Big Bubba against David Sullivan with his rabbit, which Eric was like, "Don't worry, guys, the rabbit will be there," as if it's a big thing that's going to draw us into Dave Sullivan. And Alex Wright versus Brian Pillman, which after Brian Pillman versus Justin Thunder Liger last week, and after Alex Wright versus Sabu, that's a match I would be interested to see. I'll have to check that out. But the rest of the card is very kind of scorn worthy. But damn, this Randy Savage versus Scott Norton match, it's not as long as I wanted it to be. Norton, he's so believable in his offense. He's so physical. He's so super tough. But the match itself, it doesn't sizzle before there's a Dungeon of Doom interference and a very silly finish. The shark or avalanche or earthquake, whatever he's called, kind of accidentally falls on Scott Norton's legs, and it traps Scott Norton, which allows Randy Savage to hit the flying elbow drop and pin Scott Norton for the win, it was disappointing because Norton looked like such a badass. He was squaring up to Mongo. Mongo was hyping up wanting to fight Scott Norton this week, and Bischoff and Bobby the Brain were sort of trying to calm him down and saying not to get involved because Norton's such a badass. And for Scott Norton to lose in such a silly way where he was kind of trapped between Randy Savage and a fat man who had just fallen on over his legs, it was silly. I'm gonna have to give it like a 4 out of 10 or something like that. The Dungeon of Doom just completely ruin it. Like, they ruin a lot of things. They're mad at each other for what the shark did. There's a bit of fighting. Mongo didn't even know Kevin Sullivan, which is funny. He was like, Kevin Sullivan came out with some silly pole thing, and Mongo was just like, what's he going to do? Make a popsicle out of him or something silly? And you could tell Mongo didn't even know Kevin Sullivan's name. And Kevin Sullivan booked this show, by the way, at the time. So that's a bit of insanity there. It's one of those things, isn't it? There is a lot of poor finishes. There's a lot of short matches in Nitro's history. And this was one of them. It was just such a shame that it had to be at the expense of Scott Norton. But look, Randy Savage is a main event talent, and there's no shame to losing to a talent like him. He's really, really good. And I said this in my review last week, I kind of was sad I didn't get a chance to see the Macho Man in action more often. I'm sad that I didn't watch wrestling whenever he was around. I would have been 2 back then by this stage, so I kind of missed all of his best stuff, but he is so good and such a star, and man, the world needs personalities like him nowadays. It's such a shame he's gone. Anyways, the main event, the big match that's kind of the hook that's been drawing people into Nitro all week, it's Lex Luger versus Hulk Hogan for the WCW World Heavyweight Championship. Hogan's entrance, it's huge. There's sparklers. There's a loud pop from the crowd. American Made is awesome. It's just a really good big fight feel. I love Lex Luger's theme. I love Lex Luger's look. In the ring, this match, it is very slow. At one point, Eric Bischoff says he thought Luger would have been a lot more aggressive, so there's not very much to the opening stages of it, but you can tell it's a big fight. You can tell it's 2 baby faces. The crowd are a bit split, to the point that Bischoff even has to acknowledge it, that everybody isn't going completely insane for Hulk Hogan. But it's one of those interesting dynamics that shows it really was time for Hulk Hogan to make a change. And you can see a year or 2 later, he turns heel and goes away from this all, because the babyface Hulk Hogan, especially against another semi-babyface like Lex Luger, just wasn't working by this stage. But it's a slow match. Most entertaining thing was Bobby the Brain saying that if Reggie White, the football player, ever shows up, he would give him a piece of his mind, or he wouldn't know what's hit him, which is funny because obviously the Brain's he's such a coward. They call him Weasel a lot because he's so kind of slick and cowardly and mouse-like whenever there's threats around. So it was funny to hear that. Hogan, he speeds up his offense a little bit. Eric tries to explain that Lex Luger's maybe a step or 2 behind because he's been wrestling against inferior competition on Raw, on WWF, which is a really good explanation for a match that just isn't hitting those heights that you would have expected whenever you seen the hype for it, and you imagine these two kind of, like Lex Luger was positioned to be the next Hulk Hogan in WWF, and that was a huge failure. So seeing those two take each other on is pretty dang awesome here, but it doesn't have that sizzle, it doesn't have that excitement. Luger puts on the torture rack. The crowd goes absolutely insane. I've never seen somebody in that torture rack for as long as Hogan was. It reminded me a lot of Hulk Hogan in that very famous Nitro where Lex Luger actually wins the WCW World Championship off Hulk Hogan. It was about maybe 10 times that length that Hogan was in there for, and Luger wouldn't let go. Hogan wouldn't tap out, and eventually Lex kind of sells as if he thinks he's won. He thinks Hulk Hogan's tapped out, but nobody's seen him tap out, so the match continues. Hogan hits the what on earth did I write in my notes? Sorry, yes, I just wrote that Hulk can't break out. It's such a good move. I love the torture rack. I love how insane the crowd goes. I love when Lex Luger hypes it up and everybody knows it's coming. It's such a special thing. But very odd here that he just lets go, and it's just kind of like, that's the only out because Hogan can't break out of it, but we need a bit of drama, so let's just have Lex think he'll win, think he's won, and it's kind of odd, to be honest with you, but it really does. It ramps up my excitement. Now I'm starting to feel this match a lot more. Hulk Hogan hulks up. He hits the big boot and the leg drop. It looks like he's about to win before the Dungeon of Doom comes out yet again. And it's annoying. There's a lot of finishes like this in WCW. WCW Nitro. There's so many times where they kind of book themselves into a corner with a big marquee match and they need the heel stable to interfere to get themselves away from it. So the Dungeon of Doom comes out. Randy Savage and Sting make the save. The Ed Leslie, the Zodiac still looks very silly here. Even Kamala, legends like Kamala and Ming and Kevin Sullivan, they all look so corny and strange, and the Dungeon of Doom just seems so outdated. Even then, it probably seemed a bit silly and a bit hokey to the fans. Mongo's mad at his dog again for being a Dungeon of Doom fan, which is it's no less silly than it was the week before, to be honest with you. Nobody from the Dungeon of Doom hurts Lex Luger, which it leads to, there's a bit of a smalls. Sting and Randy Savage and Lex and Hulk Hogan clear the ring. And then afterwards, when the Dungeon of Doom are gone, Mean Gene holds a kind of like a wee like conference, the same way he did in the debut Nitro. And Randy and Hulk Hogan are very suspicious of Lex Luger. They've noticed that the Dungeon of Doom didn't attack him. They're asking him what side he's on. Sting kind of quells things down. Sting's the calm person here. Sting's the mediator between everybody. Sting says that he would vouch for Lex Luger. They actually are, or they were, sorry, back then, really, really close friends. They run their own gym together. Sting vouched for Lex Luger in order for Lex to come to WCW, and man, did that pay off for them. And Sting sticks up for Lex and says that he would think that the best way for them to trust Lex Luger would be for Lex to be put into their team in replacement of Vader for the big match at Fall Brawl. Hulk doesn't want to. He's a bit unsure. Randy Savage is completely like, no, we do not want Lex Luger in our team at all. So there's that split. Sting wants him. Hulk's not sure. Randy Savage definitely doesn't want him. And he, very oddly, Randy ended up actually questioning Jimmy Hart's loyalty as well, and Jimmy does a little colourful, don't you dare accuse me of working against the Hulkster, which is ironic because later on, Randy actually ends up being right. Like, it's not that long from now that Jimmy Hart turns on Hulk Hogan for the first time ever and betrays him and costs him that WCW World Championship. So Randy actually was kind of spot on, which is a strange thing, a very strange thing that I... obviously, I wasn't aware that it happened until now. So, he's very colourful on the mic. I love Jimmy Hart. We do get overdosed by him in WCW Nitro in the first couple of years, but whenever he's on the mic, he's so cheesy and upbeat, and I really, really enjoy listening to him. So, Randy says no. Hulk's unsure. Sting says yes, but eventually Hulk Hogan decides to offer Lex Luger the place, Vader's place, in the Team Hulk Hogan, not that Hulk Hogan's an egomaniac at all, but it's Team Hulkster versus the Dungeon of Doom at Fall Brawl. So there's a bit of a, what side is Lex on? Is he on the good side? Is he on the bad side? There's a bit of dissension between the ranks, and it's quite interesting to see because obviously the Dungeon of Doom, they need a couple of things to work in their favour. They need that dissension. They need Randy Savage to look a wee bit hurt from all the stuff with Scott Norton earlier on, because Hulk Hogan and the gang should wipe out the Dungeon of Doom, to be quite honest with you. But that's where it's left. Mongo has his little dog Pepe again with this very strange, like, almost as if Pepe's a Hispanic dancer, flamenco dancer, kind of cliche thing. It's very, very odd, but at the same time, I love his enthusiasm. I love Bobby's enthusiasm and Eric's enthusiasm. And WCW is looking strong. Next week, they have the big hype of, I think it's Harlem Heat. And Harlem Heat versus either the Blue Bloods or the American Males, and that's their hype for next week. That's it. That's their hook to get you to tune in. Obviously, there's the Fall Brawl kind of fallout from it, but it's just quite interesting that that's what they're relying on you to tune you into Nitro next week, especially since this one, the big hook was Lex Luger versus Hulk Hogan. So all in all, Nitro, it's beginning to find its ground a wee bit. It's beginning to find its ground and get in the swing of things, and it's just a really, really fun thing to watch. I really enjoy watching it. You can tell what tag team I like in WCW with this shirt, but I'm enjoying watching it. So I'm enjoying that big taste of the 90s that we get from it, and I can't wait to see what happens in next week's Nitro, even if the hook is just a silly tag team match. It's a bit of filler. But anyways, guys, it's been me, Matty D. Thank you so much for checking out this review. If you have any comments or any ideas or suggestions for ways I can make things a bit better, please feel free to hit me up. Every day's a school day, you know. And I hope you're all keeping well and you all have a really great week until I see you again with the next review, okay? Thank you for checking me out and take care.